What's up, Buff Nation? Today we've got a really interesting story for you that we think you'll like. It's about how Colorado has a really big advantage this year that they didn't have last year and that they have over most of their competition. Let's get right into that and let's talk about it today. ESPN's Bill Connolly came out with some news this week about returning production. Not sure if you've seen these numbers or not yet. Not sure if you've seen where Colorado ranks. But before I tell you where we're at this year, let's talk a little bit about last year. When you think about last year, going into that 2023 season, can you guess where Colorado ranked of 133 FBS teams, where they sat? Well, it wasn't very high. They were 93rd in the country. That's bottom quarter of the teams that played college football. They were certainly one of the teams that brought back the least returning production when it came to 2023. However, in 2024, things look much different for them. They return 72% of their production from last year. Guess what, guys? That is good for 15th in the country, top 15 in the country as far as returning production goes. That counts guys returning to your roster like Shedeur, Shiloh, Travis, Cormani, others, and it counts in some of the transfers too. So if they made an impact at the school they were coming from, you do get a little bit of credit for that. What it doesn't count is if you had a running back that got 90% of your rushing yardage and he leaves, you're not getting all of that, right? It doesn't count as many of your recruits that come in because obviously they're an unknown factor. They haven't produced any production yet. Of that 72% production that comes back, 69% of it is on the offensive side of the ball. Most of your skill guys are gone. You've lost Jimmy. You've lost some different guys, but you've got a lot of it coming back on the skill side. Really, offensive line is where you've lost most of that. So most of your talented guys, your skill positions are out there on the outside. They're still there. Offensive line is going to be very new this year. 69% of your offense back is 41st in the country, and you've got 76% of your defense back. That's a massive number. You're top 13 in the country on defense as far as returning production. And anytime you're in that top 10 to 15 range, it starts to make me think about the playoff. There's 12 teams going to the playoff this year. Now, can Colorado have a top 12 or 13 defense in the country? I'll tell you, we just told you about the hire last night. It's going to be tough to get there, absolutely. But when you look at returning production, you look at how much of that defense is coming back and how it's top 13 in the country, I think that's a big deal. Why are these numbers so important? What are all these percentages and stats and numbers? At the end of the day, it's the continuity, guys. It is how much familiarity you have on a defense and an offense with each other. How much of that production can you count on being there, right? You know what you're going to get out of Shedeur Sanders. Now, could he go to another level? Could he go to a higher high? Absolutely. I don't mean that he's limited by any stretch of the imagination, but at the end of the day, you know kind of what his production is going to be. You know what you're going to get out of Travis Hunter, whether it's on one side of the ball, both sides of the ball, wherever, but you don't always know that with new guys. You don't always know that with guys that you haven't seen produce at this level before. And so knowing that, knowing who you can count on, knowing that familiarity, knowing what is coming back this year is going to be really big. Hey guys, I've got a brand new national channel that I'm going to link at the end of the video, but I had a chat with Jake Crane about Travis Hunter, USC, Deion Sanders, and more, kind of comparing the schools back when USC was in kind of their Hollywood era, Coach Prime, everything right now that's going on. I'm going to link that at the end of the video. Make sure you stick around so you don't miss that if you haven't already seen it. All right, when you look at the opponents this year, this is what stands out the most to me. North Dakota State not listed because they're not an FBS program. Obviously, their production, I don't know that it matters so much. I mean, you need to win that game one way or the other. But then when you look at the other 11 FBS programs that Colorado plays, you start out with a pretty tough one. You start out with Nebraska, who is number 3 in returning production. That's number 3 in all of the country. They bring back 77% of their roster. Now, that's not much different than Colorado, who brings back 72%, only about a 5% difference there. It's not a huge, massive gulf that you have to make up, but Nebraska is going to be a tough game for Colorado this year. You go on the road to play that, and you play in a team that brings back a lot of the talent that they had from last year. They weren't a great team last year. Colorado wasn't a great team at times last year. That's going to be a fun one, but you get them out of the way early. And whatever happens in that game happens. Hopefully you get out of there and you're 2-0, but here's where it gets good for the Buffs. After that, you play Colorado State. And remember, Colorado's 15th. This is where these other programs come in at. You play Colorado State, who is 39th in the country. And then you play Baylor, who's 41st. Then you play UCF, who's all the way down in the 100s. They're 101st. You play Kansas State, who's 82nd. You play Arizona, who's 43rd. Cincinnati's down at 62nd. And then Texas Tech is at 93rd. Your 10th game, you play Utah, who's number 16. They're as close to you as you can get, 15 and 16. And then you've got Kansas, who's 78th. And then again, you play another tough one with Oklahoma State 4th. But you have 2 teams that are ahead of you in returning production. One game, Utah, who is very, very close to you. And then 9 teams on this schedule that you're ahead of. Early weeks, you got to get off to a good start. You have to get off to a good start if you're Colorado this year. There's no doubt about it. But after week 1, after North Dakota State University, you have a stretch of 9 games where you have more production coming back than all but one team. You have a 9-game stretch where only one team has more returning talent than you, or more returning production than you. Talent's probably not the right word to use there. And that is Nebraska to start the year. After that, you play 8 straight games where you have more returning production. In early weeks, I think it's going to matter more. In later weeks, teams have figured out how to gel together. Teams have figured out and understand where that production is coming from. But you've got to start fast if you're the Buffs. You've got to start fast against some of these teams like UCF and Arizona and others who don't bring back as much talent as you do, who don't bring back as much production as you do. It will be a big deal for Colorado to be able to get off to a quick start. Now, returning production, again, it factors in the guys that were on the team from last year and the transfers, so don't miss that. But it does consider their production at previous schools. It's not a one-for-one. But Bill Connolly is very clear that having a high returning production, it doesn't always translate to more wins. But over time, he's seen consistently that teams with more returning production have improved and teams with lower returning production have regressed. How much can the Buffs improve? Well, we've talked about this, and Coach Prime talked about it too. They lost 5 games by 1 score last year. As a reminder, they won 4 games outright. They were right there 5 other times. If one play goes a little bit differently, they could win 5 more games. Now, they didn't. They didn't know how to win. They didn't know how to finish, in Coach Prime's words. And UCLA was only a 12-point game that they were very much in, just couldn't find a way to get the ball into the end zone. I think the offensive line had a lot to do with that. They had 5 or 6 games that, man, they were right in. How much different do we feel if they'd have won 8 or 9 or 10 games last year? They only were out of 2 games. That's Washington State when Shedeur went down, and then obviously the Oregon game early in the year. But if they could learn to finish, if they can use some of this returning production that now knows how to play together and knows how to gel together a little bit quicker, then I think they can win a lot more games. They can improve by a lot more. Can they do the opposite? Can they improve instead of regress? That's the goal this year. That's the metric that we'll measure them by. It took them a lot of the season to figure out how to gel together. It took them a lot of the season to figure out how to play together. It seemed like down the back half of the year, they were actually playing better. They just couldn't find a way to win the game. Can they start that at the beginning of the year? Can they start that and get things rolling early? Can they get off to that 3-0 start again? Can they get off to a better than a 3-0 start? Can they not have that letdown in week 4 like they did last year? That's all stuff that we're going to find out if they can learn to finish. But I'm telling you, this is a massive, massive advantage for them to have over a lot of teams on their schedule and over that 2023 team. We'll always remember that 2023 team. We'll always remember the excitement that it gave us. We'll always think about how they were this close to really doing something special on the field if they could have just learned how to finish. And that's what Coach Prime has talked about himself. Now, listen, we've told you about the new channel that we've got. I spoke with Jake Crane of Crane & Company about Coach Prime, about Deion Sanders, Travis Hunter, and others. I've got that interview linked on the screen right now. If you haven't checked that new channel out, it's a national channel trying to chat with people about national topics. If you want to show some support, go hit the subscribe button over there. We've got a couple of, I think 3 videos now on Coach Prime and the Buffs. Go check those out. There's a Buffs playlist over there you can check out. Video on the screen, click it right now, and thank you for watching the Prime Time for college football.